The Arcana is the means by which all is revealed. Familiar words for a certain fanbase, but actually quite relevant to Three Houses too. A subtle motif, Three Houses crests are inspired by the tarot, a deck of playing cards from the mid-14th century, commonly used for divination since the late 1700s. Three Houses' 22 crests are a one-to-one representation of the 22 Major Arcana, the tarot's trump cards, whose upright and reversed forms hold divinatory meanings, encompassing the archetypes, events, and life lessons one might encounter on their journey to wholeness. In my curiosity, I analysed some of the characters in this paradigm, and was surprised how well most of them fit. So, I'm gonna analyse how each of the game's main Crest-Bearers represent the Arcana their crests associated with. Let's start with probably the most important card in the deck. The Fool, numbered 0, represents endless possibilities and boundless potential, having no specific place within the Major Arcana's order. The Fool's depicted as a blithe, adventuring youth, about to step over a precipice into the unknown, representing a leap of faith in starting a new journey or venture. His purity and blank slate nature is symbolized by the white rose in his hand, while his canine companion, urging him on, represents openness to new experiences. In all, the Fool calls for spontaneity, shedding fear of the unknown, and diving into new beginnings. The Major Arcana are often referred to as the Fool's journey, which explains his number 0. As the Major Arcana's protagonist, he's always present. With that in mind, you might expect Byleth to represent the Fool, but not so, which makes sense. I don't think Three Houses' story is literally meant to be a Fool's journey. Despite appearances, we're not quite Persona yet. It's more of a motif, with each Major Arcana inspiring their respective characters' writing and design. Case in point, the actual Fool, Anna Bobana. Anna's obviously not a main protagonist, she's actually the exact opposite, a minor side character locked behind a paywall, which is comically on brand, with no story appearances nor support. Instead, Anna symbolizes the Fool visually and in terms of her life position. Anna's trickster design borrows Awakening Anna's trickster outfit, resembling a stereotypical jester. Royal courts in the medieval and Renaissance eras often employed jesters, also known as fools, to entertain guests, through song, dance, playing tricks, and telling jokes. From the motley red-yellow colour scheme to the winkle-picker boots, the jester vibes ooze from this design. Really, all Anna's missing is the funny hat. Anna's portrait also changes when she's in the trickster class, another nod to Awakening Anna, but I like to think it also emphasizes my previous point. And it goes beyond the visual. Anna's a wheeling, dealing merchant with no allegiance to any nation, always
working for money. You understand.
She's a free spirit, and her versatility and spontaneity are key traits of the upright Fool. Just as the Fool doesn't fit the Major Arcana's order, Anna's absent from the story. However, she represents the Fool's omnipresence by always being available to the player, whether as an ally or source of equipment. She also has no recruitment requirements, and can be recruited on any route as early as Chapter 3, making her potentially your first out-of-house unit. With her relatively balanced growth rates and solid spread of boons and banes, you can build her in several different ways too, emphasizing the Fool's versatility. True to form, Anna leaves Fodlan soon after the war, seeking new endeavors. Having completed her journey, the Fool takes off for another venture. While not a traditional Fool in terms of the Fool's journey, Anna demonstrates the meaning of the Arcana in her own way, particularly the virtue of openness to new opportunities and experiences. Considering this particular depiction of Anna has kind of been a thing since Awakening, it seems like a match made in heaven. The Magician's numbered 1 to represent new opportunities, similar to the Fool. However, where the Fool symbolizes innocence, spontaneity, and freedom, the Magician represents harnessing one's willpower, creativity, resourcefulness, and skill to manifest their inner potential and achieve their goals. The Magician's depiction shows this. He stands at a bench with items representing each of the tarot suits, displaying his abundant resources, while the infinity symbol above his head represents his boundless potential. Saint Macuil, known as the Windcaller in-game, represents the Magician. He only appears as the boss of Claude's Paralogue in Verdant Wind, so his details are scarce, but what we do learn is on point for the magician. Macuil was a renowned strategist and Seiros' chief tactician. He's also the most dexterous of the four saints, being an accomplished blacksmith that forged many of their sacred weapons in the War of Heroes. He was a powerful warrior, said to be second in strength only to Seiros herself, and was literally a master magician. Thus, Macuil was key to Seiros' endeavors, manifesting her ideas with his tactical acumen, proficiency, and judicious use of the resources the saints had at their disposal. Through this, Macuil represents the magician's message of creativity and taking an active effort to achieve your goals. The High Priestess, or just Priestess, is a tiara-clad woman sitting before a veil adorned with pomegranates, symbolizing her mental and spiritual abundance. On her lap sits a scroll reading Torah, representing the Jewish holy book. The black and white pillars she sits between represent the world's duality. As a mediator who understands the secret of this duality, she guards this sacred knowledge from unworthy eyes. The crescent moon at her feet represents her emotional control and subconscious attunement, while her crown and the cross on her heart symbolize her status as a divine ruler. The priestess is the boundary between the conscious and unconscious mind, representing intuition, emotional clarity, and feminine divinity. A mysterious woman of profound wisdom, she advocates deeper knowledge and introspection, asserting that the answers you seek lie within. Look past appearances, trust your gut, and commune with your inner voice. Heed subconscious wisdom, such as through prayer, meditation, or even dreams. When conventional logic fails, follow your intuition with conviction. Rich with interiority, Rhea and Edelgard are diametrically opposed yet very similar, so their sharing a crest and arcana is extremely thematically relevant. Both are powerful, intelligent, headstrong women whose traumatic experiences shaped their radical worldviews, which they uncompromisingly impose on Fodlan. Both represent the priestess's mysterious nature, from withholding information, to repressing their true intentions and feelings behind facades, to their emotional seclusion. They're intensely secretive, and at times deceptive, weaponizing confusion and mystery to bring peace and/or progress to Fodlan. But for all their similarities, they represent the Arcana quite differently. Let's start with Rhea. Rhea represents the priestess much more literally, being an actual high priestess. She founded an entire religion and brought Fodlan society under a goddess, a divine feminine figure, standing as its de facto ruler. As a child of the goddess, the legendary Saint Seiros herself, she's also a divine figure, and Kut's a rather divine figure too. Seriously, her flowing robes and hair, heart-shaped face, dignified and refined voice, Rhea evokes the very image of the priestess, like a patron saint in the present day. Funny that, Rhea presents as a wise, benevolent and feminine mediator, which I don't believe is purely a persona. She serves as a guiding light to many, providing strength and comfort with her divine insight, while remaining tolerant to non-believers like Shamir. The Church of Seiros is largely a sham, but Rhea herself is a genuinely devout person with a strong concept of how the world should be, because she lived it. She knows the world's secrets, they're in her bones. This intuition, born from experience, affords her the wisdom to lead Fodlan to relative stability over a millennium. However, Rhea publicly represses her true motives and feelings toward humans. The genocide of Rhea's people made Rhea fear being targeted again if the truth of the Nabateans' bodies is exposed. Considering that actually happens to Flame, fair enough. But this leads to her repressive actions, purporting a false history and religion that drives Fodlan's class divide and stagnating Fodlan's progress by implementing isolationist policies that distance Fodlan from outside cultures and blocking technological advancements, such as oil, autopsies, and the printing press, all while withholding information about those who slither in the dark. Just like the priestess, Rhea is a guardian of sacred knowledge, maintaining Fodlan's peace and protecting her remaining people. However, she takes the priestess's mysterious nature to the extreme. Her inability to trust after the Red Canyon massacre leads to her increasingly suspicious secrecy, eventually causing people like Geralt and even Seteth to doubt her, while her excessive passivity leaves her ineffective at dealing with Fodlan's issues, drawing further doubt from those with issues with the church, like a certain someone. While the priestess encourages silent contemplation, excessive withdrawal and secrecy can be harmful, a message of the reversed priestess, where the upright priestess represents intuitive knowledge, emotional clarity and self-belief, the reversed priestess represents personal disharmony, secrets, hidden agendas, and excessive trust in others' opinions. This all applies to Rhea pre-timeskip, but that last part is ultimately her goal, resurrecting Sophis and having her guide the world to salvation, forcing mankind to rely on an esoteric intuition instead of their own. Despite her justified reticence, Rhea cares about humanity. She wants peace, but also wants her mother back. These goals mentally converge. Rhea believes that humanity isn't fit to guide itself. Curiously though, she also considers herself unworthy of leading them long term, concluding that Sophis must return to do it. I think Rhea genuinely believes this, as the world was peaceful for however long Sophis was around. Her willingness to glorify Nemesis, the man who slaughtered her mother and people to maintain peace until she can do it, demonstrates her conviction. However, she's also trying to justify her obsession with reviving her, stemming from her unresolved grief and loneliness over losing her and her people. In her resentment and grief, Rhea works to resurrect Sophis by implanting her Creststone, her heart, into artificial bodies. While her doing this to the stillborn Byleth wasn't part of that plan, she deludes herself into believing she can revive Sophis through them, as her wisdom succumbs to her longing. It's a horrific yet triste display of her emotional instability, clouding her insight. Rhea's not totally oblivious to Fodlan's problems, and is displeased with issues like the class divide, but in her paranoia and grief-stricken mind, Sophis's return is the universal solution. Thus, she not only isolates herself from others, but largely withdraws from her society's issues, keeping Fodlan in purgatory, isolated from the world. This bites her in Crimson Flower. Edelgard swipes Byleth, and with them, Rhea's best chance at reuniting with her mother from right under Rhea's nose. In attacking Byleth without giving proper account for herself, she plays into Edelgard's hands. By acting like the monster Edelgard accuses her of being, validating her cause and pushing others to her side. As CF continues, Rhea loses more and more, until eventually her wisdom, intuition, and compassion are wholly distorted by her frenzied emotions. She becomes an embodiment of the reversed priestess, and Edelgard slays her accordingly. Things play out differently in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, which emphasize the Emerald Priestess's hidden sacred knowledge. Rhea spends almost 6 years as Edelgard's captive, and an oft-overlooked factor is Rhea's change during that time. After Claude saves her in Verdant Wind, she drops her secrecy after a little prodding, and voluntarily makes he and Byleth the first humans in centuries to know the full truth regarding Crest's, Heroes' Relics, and Fodlan's history. This also makes them the humans that best understand Rhea's personal circumstances and intentions, and they defeat Nemesis in her stead. The priestess finds people worthy of her sacred knowledge, trusting the future to them. Silver Snow's similar, but with far more thematic development for Rhea. She proactively tells Byleth the whole truth behind their birth and what exactly they are, but it goes further than that. Rhea apologizes to Byleth and willingly cedes leadership of Fodlan to them. Similar to Verdant Wind, she drops her hidden motives and facade from Part 1, choosing to trust and value the real, human Byleth and dropping her impossible dream of bringing Sophis back. In Rhea's S support, it goes even further. Rhea becomes the Archbishop she always should have been. With a clear heart, soothed soul, and stable mind, she uses her own intuition to foster Fodlan's miraculous prosperity. The wise, spiritual, compassionate mediator representing the upright priestess was real, and thrives as Rhea lets go of the past and starts moving forward. Notably, Rhea largely rehabilitates herself. With time and silence, Rhea confronts herself and her grief. And ironically, we find the Holy Woman repentant for her sins, showing her capacity for introspection. As she recounts in her S support, she even manages to commune with Sophis. Whether she actually did or this was just a subconscious manifestation, she finds closure and clarity in this divine revelation. Here, Rhea doesn't just resemble the priestess, she becomes her. Beneath her trauma and grief, Rhea's best self represents the priestess's spiritual enlightenment and divine knowledge, both visually and narratively, as well as her compassion and empathy. It all depends on if she can achieve that. Let's move on to Edelgard. AD represents the priestess much less literally, lacking Rhea's religious and spiritual trappings. Instead of feminine divinity, AD's design evokes a far more military image that suits her narrative role. It also works in that Rhea emphasizes the priestess's spirituality, something AD has a tenuous relationship with. Just as Rhea's betrayal by humans broke her trust in them, AD's traumatic experience with the Slivers developed a hatred of crests, extending to Fodlan's crest-centric culture. Meanwhile, her unanswered prayers during her suffering broke her faith in higher power. This, plus her perspective on Fodlan's history, leads to her mistrust of the Church for the false history they purport. More than that, Edelgard hates the Church. To her, it's a corrupt, antiquated regime, led by an inhuman dictator that ruined Fodlan and selfishly exploits a devout public. She fundamentally believes that Fodlan's current state is wrong, and her inner voice compels her to rise against it and replace it with her ideal, a meritocracy with no value on crests, where none will suffer like she did. In other words, a world of true wisdom, defined by people acting on their intuition, a world of the upright priestess. Her personality matches this. AD's relentless. At her best, she's an authoritative commander and emperor with unwavering self-belief and volition, tempered by self-awareness and introspection. She ruminates on the blood and suffering on her hands in Crimson Flower, and even softens her view of faith in her supports, but steals herself anyway, devoting her shortened lifespan to her revolution, and taking the ends justify the means to the nth degree. She's willing to lie to everyone, antagonize half the world, and ally with the Slivers, who tortured her, killed her family, and countless others. She subjugates Fodlan with them, clinging to her bone-deep belief that at the end of her scarlet path lies paradise. Her conviction is, frankly, outrageous. Sophis above, Homegirl would literally rather demonize herself than give up, and forces Byleth to kill her in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow when the jig is up. However you interpret her actions in Asher Moon's finale, the bottom line is, AD wouldn't dilute her conviction by letting Dimitri spare her, and in her own route, she actualizes her conviction. Crimson Flower's ending mural depicts her crushing the Alliance, Church, and Kingdom flags under her heel, snuffing out the last remnants of the goddess, obliterating numerous ingrained structures and philosophies, and hauling Fodlan forward to a future dictated by her intuition. But of course it's not all roses. AD has her own struggles with the reversed priestess in every route, including excessive secrecy, repressed feelings, personal disharmony, having her own hidden agendas, and falling for the hidden agendas of others. AD spends White Clouds masquerading as a normal student, hiding her true motives, and secretly working with the Slivers as the Flame Emperor with her forcibly granted extra crest. Her knowledge of them infiltrating Garrick Mark makes her unwillingly complicit in Flayn's kidnapping, Manuela's injury, the Ramaya incident, and Gerald's death, not to mention the innocent lives used to create the Slivers' demonic beasts, which she leans into by looting the Holy Tomb for crest stones, all the while hiding the truth of these occurrences or obliquely drip-feeding it. AD didn't want most of that. She knows the Slivers need to go, but despite interfering with them throughout White Clouds, she represses her desire to actually take them out to keep her cover and maintain their much-needed support after she declares war on the Church. Edelgard's secrecy and single-mindedness can ruin her budding relationships at this point, even on the Black Eagle's path. Should that happen, she becomes lost in her fixation, further repressing her warmer feelings, especially her longing for normalcy and connection, and approaches being that leader with a heart of ice she fears being in CF, even if she never goes full Ice Queen. Just as Rhea's crazed form in CF's finale illustrates the reversed priestess by embodying her emotional disharmony, Edelgard's hegemon form in Asher Moon does so by embodying her laser focus becoming tunnel vision, and her inability to trust. And just like Rhea, she's slain accordingly. Beyond that is her growing dependence on the Sliver's support in non-Crimson Flower routes, as they further their own malicious intentions by sowing political discord across Fodlan, while she remains unaware of their true influence on Fodlan's history. AD accuses the Church of purposely splitting the Empire to take over the world, and in Crimson Flower, she reveals her understanding of the truth about Rhea and Fodlan's history to Byleth, sourcing the hereditary information between emperors she's privy to. But on both counts, she's off the mark. I mean, Homegirl calls the genocide of Rhea's people and the murder of the goddess a simple dispute. Nah, she doesn't even know the slithers caused that too. Edelgard acts under faulty information, which she never verifies, leaping to conclusions about Rhea, which, while not entirely wrong, miss critical context which she never gets, even when she has Rhea at her mercy for 6 years. She fancies herself as a guardian of sacred knowledge too, which is half right, and thinks only she can save Fodlan. However, her bias and trauma warp her perception, and she swallows what the Slithers and Empire feed her, diabolizing Rhea, the Nabateans, the Church, and Crest. Like Rhea, trauma is one of Adie's greatest motivations. While she claims to throw it away into the darkness, that pain clouds her judgment. This is another part of her struggle with the reversed Priestess. Edelgard grabs at the chance to save the world, without stopping and seeking a deeper understanding of the Church's actions, what she's been told, and her own perspective. Her bias, trauma, looming mortality, desire to help mankind, and low-key savior complex push her to leap at what she's been told, putting excessive trust in the words of others, and letting her intuition be manipulated. Eschewing diplomacy, she wages war on a legitimately questionable regime, but does so with malformed understanding, while in league with Fodlan's actual greatest threat. This shows an ironic difficulty in moving past appearances or seeking deeper knowledge, especially for one so seemingly aware. Add to that her perennial secrecy, which doesn't help. Even by the end of CF, she continues deceiving her closest friends, framing the Church for the Slithers' assault on Aryan Road to further vilify Rhea and validate herself. Unlike Rhea, lying actually works out perfectly for her, right up until the end of her story, so there's no reason to think she won't keep controlling the flow of information, exactly like Rhea did. And regardless of the route, Edelgard never learns the full truth of everything. In Verdant Wind, she refuses surrender to Claude because of his lack of knowledge, and he comes to know more than she does after defeating her. And in CF, she ironically kills her one source of enlightenment, who gave Claude that aforementioned knowledge. It's debatable how important that actually is though, since she improves Fodlan tremendously in her endings anyway. And Fodlan improves in non-CF routes, largely because of her instigation. It's a testament to her willingness to do something for a world that she felt needed it, and her unknowingly rejecting the arcane wisdom of the past for her own intuition not only fits the Priestess, but it's just very Adie, isn't it? The point is this: Adie wants to overthrow a lying ruler in the name of true wisdom, intuiting Fodlan's needs, and shows unwavering conviction in achieving this. Outside CF, her secrecy alienates her allies, who ultimately take her down, as she withdraws into and dies for her ambition. Meanwhile in CF, she succeeds, using her intuition to bring great change to Fodlan, and achieves a greater level of personal harmony. However, she doesn't fully overcome her deceptive tendencies, and despite the virtue of her meritocracy, it's based on half-truths and inaccuracies that further distort history, and is created through deceit by someone who themselves was manipulated and is unknowingly ignorant, with the other priestess's sacred knowledge forever lost. Where Rhea emphasizes the priestess's intangible spiritual themes, Edelgard emphasizes her unshakable belief in her intuition, for better or worse. I have to say, it seems fitting that Seiros, the original bearer of her namesake crest, is a more literal embodiment of the priestess archetype, while Adie's a more metaphorical take. As I said earlier, Rhea and Adie are very similar. Together, they represent the priestess's messages, from the power of intuition, to spiritual enlightenment, to the danger of repressed emotions, and the significance of mediating one's innermost feelings and knowledge with the outside world. With that in mind, it's ironic that regardless of route, at least one of them gets murked by the end of the game. I guess Fodlan ain't big enough for 2 high priestesses. Thanks all for watching, I hope you enjoyed that. This is a bit of a different video. Analyzing characters like this is interesting and trickier than I expected. I realized very quickly that the tarot is by no means an exact science. There were several times while researching that I got completely opposing answers between sources, which made writing pretty confusing at first, especially since this first episode happens to cover the walking, talking hornet's nest, so I was pretty intent on getting my words right. But once I keyed in that it's more about getting an idea of the basic concept of each arcana, and then making your own interpretations and connections, and ended up being pretty fun. I was aiming to cover all the Arcanas in this video, but then I wrote 500 words on just Anna, and I realized that was so not happening. I should say, this series was inspired by a series I've been watching on Persona's tarot-based characters by a channel called Lady Vigilia, or Lady Vigilia, I'm not sure. If you're into Persona, or Shin Megami Tensei, or the Trail series, I definitely recommend her. She does some really cool analytical videos from quite unique perspectives. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the series. There's more videos in the works, Fire Emblem and not, which I hope you enjoy too. But until then, take care, and I'll see you later.